of just several days ago, that the House of Representatives held a vote on the National Defense Authorization Act. And the question there is, are they or are they not going to include into that National Defense Authorization Act the remaining 40 pages of the UAP Disclosure Act that requires setting up the Board of Review, to set up the subpoena power, to set up the process by means of which that panel was going to set up a controlled a UFO controlled disclosure campaign plan to deliver to the president. The question was, were they going to include that in that National Defense Authorization Act? And there was only one member of the Republican Party who agreed to not support the National Defense Authorization Act without that amendment in it, because they brought to the floor the NDAA without that amendment in it. And every single one of the members of the House of Representatives that were Democrats voted against the National Defense Authorization Act because it contained all kinds of things that they disagreed with. For example, taking all the money away from training anybody on racial justice, taking all the money out of the Defense Department, training anybody on gender sensitivity. There were provisions in there banning any trans people from serving in the military. All those kind of things were in the National Defense Authorization Act. So every one of the Democrats voted against it. All that was necessary is for four members of the House of Representatives to have joined the total Democrats and opposed the National Defense Authorization Act on the grounds that it didn't have the UAP Disclosure Act in it. Okay? And the only person who refused to support the NDAA without that amendment in it was Eric Burleson. All he needed to do was have Nancy Mace or Ana Luna or Tim Burchett join with him in withholding their support for the NDAA without the amendment in it, and the NDAA would have failed, and they would have had to take it back, and they could hold out and say, look, we're not going to approve the NDAA until you put the amendment in it. Right? They all profess to want protection for the whistleblowers. They all profess to be wanting to get the disclosure bill put in, and yet they didn't dare give the impression to people that they didn't support the military by voting against the National Defense Authorization Act until they put the amendment in. And so within an hour of that hearing, one of the most important events that happened that was in direct connection to that hearing was that Burchett and Ana Luna and Nancy Mace did not, in fact, put their money where their mouth was. you know, they basically chickened out. And they didn't dare join Eric Burleson in withholding their support for that act without the UAP Disclosure Act in it. So that was a major event that took place that a lot of people didn't even realize was happening, and it was in a certain sense a part of that hearing. And despite all the testimony that they got, and George Knapp, of course, his testimony was extremely important because George Knapp was telling them right to their face that, look, this is absolutely real. He, as an ABC television journalist of a complete reputation, is saying, look, he's talked to dozens of people, dozens and dozens of high-level people who know that this is true and that the Congress has to do something about this. And he basically provided, I think, sort of an emotional pitch about that. But the other fellow, Dylan, the Air Force officer, that he basically told them right to their face about this extraordinary event of seeing a huge 100 to 150-foot triangle just rise right up off one of our military bases and fly right away. So that's I mean, what we're trying to figure out is how do we get enough people in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate to stop being afraid of the national security state people who are basically threatening them, not only threatening to kick them out of office by secretly funneling funds into against them, but threatening them physically. And this is exactly what's happening here. That they've become convinced that the national security state is willing to resort to physical violence against them personally, if necessary, in order to protect this information. That's what we really learned on September 9th. Uh, and that's a frightening situation that we're in right now. And if the agencies continue to be instructed to not comply with the order of Congress to turn over this information to the archives 4 days from now on September 30th, you know, we're going to see whether or not that is going to generate enough support inside the Senate and in the House to have enough of these individual members of the Congress dare to join together to confront the national security state over this.